Example 1. We're asked to solve the following polynomial inequality algebraically. X cubed plus 2x squared minus 3x is less than 0. Okay, so our first step is to make sure we have a 0 on the right side. We already have that here. We have it in place. We don't have to do any rearrangement of this inequality. So if we want to make a note, we already have 0 on the right. So then this allows us to identify this is our function f of x. So x cubed plus 2x squared minus 3x, that's our function f of x. And we want to know where it's strictly less than 0. So if we want to solve where the function is less than 0, we're looking for the negative regions. So we want negative regions. So when we make our number line and a sign chart, we're looking for the regions that are negative. All right, the second step is to solve the related equation. This is not an equation, but now we're going to solve the related equation to find the zeros of this function. So we know if we set a function to 0, makes sense, we're solving for the zeros. So if we set our function equal to 0, we can see we can factor out an x from all three terms. And then we've got that trinomial, we can do our trial and error. And this will factor into x plus 3 times x minus 1. So we can see that our zeros then will be 0, negative 3, and 1. So if this problem had an equal sign instead, if it was an equation, these would be our answers. But because it's an inequality, we have to use these to make a sign chart. So steps 3 and 4. We're going to divide our number line, so sketch a large number line because you're actually going to do your work on the number line. And the only numbers we need are negative 3, those zeros, negative 3, 0, and 1. So make sure they're in the proper consecutive order. But other than that, it doesn't matter if it's to scale, it doesn't matter anything else you have on the number line. Okay, so I'm going to use those zeros to divide my number line into regions. So we can see we have a region from negative infinity to negative 3, from negative 3 to 0, from 0 to 1, and 1 to infinity. So what we want to do is we're going to test a number, an x value in each of these regions and see if it results in a positive or negative y value, because we're looking for strictly negative because we want the less than 0. Okay, so we're going to pick any x value in this region from negative infinity to negative 3. You can pick any number. I chose negative 4 here for our notes. So I'm going to plug in, I'm going to find f of negative 4. I'm going to find the y value when x is negative 4. So now you could either plug it in by hand, or you guys can use the graphing calculator. So if you enter your function, x cubed plus 2x squared minus 3x, and if we go to the table, we can use the table here to get our y values. So when x is negative 4, y is negative 20. So what you need to show me, the work you need to show me, is everything I'm going to write here on the number line. So we need to show f of negative 4 equals negative 20. And we actually don't care the exact value negative 20. All we care about is that it's negative. So this region of our number line we can label as a negative region. Now we're going to test a point between negative 3 and 0. So I chose negative 2. So I'm going to find f of negative 2. I'm going to find the y value when x is negative 2. So again, you can go to your calculator, use the table. When x is negative 2, y is 6. So I need you to show me that. Again, you don't have to use that point, but whichever point you choose, you have to show me that work on the number line. So again, we don't care specifically that it's 6, but we do care that it's positive. So any number in this region is going to give us a positive y value. Now we want to look between 0 and 1. So any number between 0 and 1, so you need a decimal or a fraction. I'm going to use 0.5. So I want f of 0.5. Now on our table, I'm not counting by 0.5s, I'm counting by whole numbers. So another option is if you guys go to the graph and you can calculate a value. So you can hit second function, trace, and the first option is value. So we hit enter and it will calculate the value of the function when x is 0.5. So I'll put in 0.5, hit enter. So here's another way to get, so that's nice if you have decimal or fraction values that you don't have on your table, you can use this. So my y value is negative 0.875. So I want to label that on my number line, negative 0.875. And again, we don't specifically care that it's negative 0.875, but we do care that it's negative. So I'll label this region of our number line negative. And then finally, we want the region from 1 to infinity, so anything greater than 1. I'll choose a 2 here, so I want to find f of 2. So again, if I go onto the table, or I could calculate it here. So when our x value is 2, our y value is 10. So we'll write f of 2 equals 10. And what's important is that it's a positive number, so we'll label this part of the number line, this region, a positive region. So now, since our inequality, once we got the 0 on the right, since the inequality is a less than, we're looking for the negative region. So these two regions right here are going to be our solutions. So these are not, the positive ones we don't want. We want where the f of x is less than 0. So these are going to be our solutions, these regions. And then you guys can shade right on your number line. So I'm going to shade my solution. So I want all of these x values from negative infinity to negative 3. And now, since I have a strict inequality less than, I'm going to use a parenthesis here as my boundary instead of a bracket. And now I've got this region from 0 to 1. And again, I'll use parentheses because of that less than, strict less than without the inequality. So now here's the graph of your solution, and then we just want to write these in interval notation. So our final step here, our solution in interval notation, we've got our left region is negative infinity to negative 3, and then the right region is 0 to 1. So this is our solution in interval notation. Now, if we want to check this graphically, we know on a graph, if we want where the f of x values, where the y values are less than 0, we want to look below the x-axis. So we want the negative regions, and if you were doing this graphically, we can write this in here. We want regions below the x-axis. So we have our graph here, and we can see, we want to see the regions of this graph where it falls below the x-axis. So you can see this region here, negative infinity to negative 3, and then this little piece here from 0 to 1, which is exactly the answers we got. So if you guys want to make a little sketch in your notes, I'd recommend that. Just make a little rough sketch of this graph, and all you need again are the zeros and just the approximate shape. So here's our negative 3, and then our 0, 0, and our 1, 0, and just get that approximate snake shape. So our solution is these regions here, so this piece and this piece, which definitely match up with our answer here in interval notation, so we know we're correct.